Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad Podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the Fatherhood Authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell. Thank you for joining me another episode as we continue to crank along. Hey, the other day I got an email from Podbean, which is the service that oversees our podcast and distributes our podcast to all of the other podcast platforms out there. And it sent me a badge, and the badge was congratulations on your 150th episode. That was the one from last week. I had no idea we had done 150 episodes. It seems like this thing is moving along so fast. And I am still not exhausted of conversations. There are so many conversations that are needed, so many voices that I want you guys to hear, and so many topics and areas that we need to go deeper in. So we've kind of done the broad stroke thing, but now my mind is in, let's go deeper, let's go broader, and let's really kind of dig into some of these subject matters. And my guest today, Danielle Shears, who is a registered nurse, a certified functional nutritionist, and the visionary founder of Better Choice Health LLC. She has over 30 years of experience in traditional medicine and a deeply personal journey through chronic illness. Danielle brings a unique blend of clinical expertise and holistic insight to the conversation. After working on specialties ranging from neurology to sports medicine, Danielle saw firsthand how the healthcare system often treats symptoms rather than the root causes. This realization led her to embrace a more functional, whole-body approach to healing, empowering individuals, especially those over 40. You know where my heart is with the seasoned folks out there. I'm in the 50 plus. Well, I'm in the 60 plus range, but I got this like love for the 50 plus people. And so we're going to bring the 40 plus in. They can stick their ear in and get some wisdom, but we're concerned about you as well as you move into your more seasoned stage. But she takes charge of their health, but she wants them to take charge of their health through nutrition, stress management, and lifestyle change. Today, we're going to explore how her works help families and caregivers think more about their health and well-being. How you doing, Danielle? I think I have you on mute. Let me ask you that question again. How you doing, Danielle?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I can't complain at all. Life is good. I am living, not surviving.
Oh,
And so that's, as an old friend of mine used to always say, no, actually, he's not an old friend. Let me stop calling him an old friend. He's a seasoned friend, says to me, better to be seen than to be viewed.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, because that could be a whole nother set of problems for a whole lot of different people. Listen, we start our podcast off with a unique request of you, because it sets the stage, at least to our core audience, because it's such a good thing to kind of know about people before we get deeper into the conversation. And what I ask our guests to do is tell us your daddy story.
Okay. Just tell my story, huh?
Just tell your story. What's your daddy story?
Well, I just long as I can remember, I have wanted to be in the healthcare setting. Never knew exactly what area I wanted to be in, but I always knew just from a young child. And then quickly, as I got into that space in undergraduate studies, I found that I wanted to be more on the promotional of health versus the reactive side. But again, still not being able to pinpoint where that area was. And fast forward many, many years after that, after becoming a nurse, and then ultimately experiencing a health scare of my own, that is what moved me into the functional nutrition space. And like I said, as long as I can remember, I've always been about the health. And I think it was my undergraduate studies where I witnessed in our anatomy and physiology labs where we actually got a look into the human body. We can look at pictures online and we can look at different models online, but to actually open up a human cadaver body and see all the things, it really opened my eyes to a new world of like, wow, how intricate our body is and how interconnected it all is. So all that stuff started to build up in my life.
Hmm.
And once I experienced a health scare of my own, and I realized very quickly that this traditional conventional medicine route was not the route. Because first of all, they didn't know what was wrong, couldn't figure it out. Many lab tests later, many imagings later, just could not figure out what it was. And so um, I knew I had to take matters kind of into my own hands, and just knowing what I know from the conventional side, I was like, there's got to be something more. There's got to be something different. And that's what led me to the functional world, where I had to dive into nutrition and lifestyle type things. And that's where it landed me. And then after
Okay.
seeing the effects of all of that myself, then that's when I was able to help other family members and that sort of thing. And then it pushed me into start my own business because I saw the effects of, my father and my, family members going through the same stuff that we all in this community kind of go through: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, cancers, that sort of things. And I'm like, these are not death sentence diagnoses. They're not a death sentence. They don't have to be. And so that's
Hmm.
what led me to that path.
Okay. Because we're going to lean in a little bit on the men's side of health, because you all, in terms of women, you treat health differently than men do. Like when you look at the examples that your father showed you based on how he dealt with and saw his own health, what kind of messages did you get from that?
He went the conventional route, and the route where he was reactive. He actually
Mm,
went in and had a rotator cuff surgery. And that was when the doctor, now this is during a surgical procedure and follow up, is when they first told him that his blood pressure was too high. And this is the
mm,
thing that concerns me. So they took that incident and from there kind of plagued him as this candidate for blood pressure medication. Now, I don't know about you, but most people's blood pressure will be somewhat high when you're having surgery and when you're in pain. But they took that
mm,
incident, and from that, post surgery and in doctor's appointments, is where they finally said, okay, we need to start you on a blood pressure medication. We don't know what that was. And when I asked him about it, after getting to this space, he, of course, didn't remember what it was, which is fine. But before that, it was all reactive. And
mm,
I don't remember or recall my dad talking about health, talking about exercise, getting any exercise. We certainly weren't eating, you know,
mhm.
the way I
Eating
eat
right. You were
today.
eating, you weren't eating right.
We certainly were not eating the way I eat today. It was just the way we grew up. It was just the way it was, the fried
Hmm.
foods. And even though we ate at home every night, because he did believe in cooking, my parents cooked. But it still was the fried stuff. It still was the
Mm,
desserts and all the things. And no, there was never a health talk. There was never any example of, and it was just because it wasn't what was talked about. It wasn't like he just
mhm,
ignored it. It just wasn't a thing or something that
mm.
he made a priority. So,
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the word functional, right? Because that's really what we're talking about. When you talk about functional wellness,
mhm,
that's the wellness that allows us to literally function
absolutely
every day. And we don't think about
right.
that, particularly men. Like, our healthcare system is the ER room, right? And the only reason that we go there is because we believe that something that should be functioning isn't functioning, at least not at the optimal pace that it should be
Mhm.
functioning. When you think about the functional space, what are some of the elements of function that we like fail on the most?
Well, and the reason why it's functional is because and particularly with nutrition, functional nutrition, if we would use the power of nutrition, we would see how nutrition, I mean, literally affects our brain, our organ, our hearts, our liver, our pancreas, like every system in your body can be impacted by the power of nutrition to help it function at its optimal state. Like when we
Mm-hmm.
have deficiencies, for instance, in nutrients and minerals and things, the functions of those organs decreases. And so we don't
Mm-hmm.
think of it. We just think, oh, I'm just so tired. I don't know why I'm tired all the time. There's a deficiency there. Your heart that pumps around the clock never stops until it stops. It needs to function. It needs certain things. It needs potassium. It needs the magnesium. It needs the things. And when we're deficient in that, it will not function properly. So literally things that we put in our
Mm-hmm.
body on a daily basis impacts how each thing functions. Like everything. Just me sitting here blinking is
Mm-hmm.
made possible by the nutrients that I put in my body. And you don't think of that because you just
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, you take for granted you get up and you're blinking. No, there is a whole system
Right.
that controls just me sitting here moving, smiling, for instance, just smiling,
Mm-hmm.
blinking,
Mm-hmm.
breathing, being able to do this. Because, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, someone that has a stroke can't do that. Someone that has a
Right.
stroke can't smile. Someone that
Right.
may not be able to blink. So it
Mm-hmm.
literally, the
Yeah.
functionality, that's the reason why functional medicine is key in people making sure that your body is working optimally. And it looks at the individual person. That's what I love about the functional space. It's not this generic, okay, you came
Mm-hmm.
in with XYZ symptoms. Now we're going to give you this, which is what they give everybody that had that symptom. But guess what else this person, or guess what else you may have had? You may have been going
Mm-hmm.
through a mental breakdown because you just lost, a child, or you may be going through, some other stressors that everybody else in this population that you prescribe that same medication for may not be
Mm-hmm.
going through. And so in the functional space, we're able to individualize it because we're looking at the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotion. We're looking at all of that because all of that
Yeah,
plays
but
a part in wellness.
that's very detailed, right? And when you're talking about men, we don't think in details like that.
Right,
Not
right,
when it comes to our health, right?
right.
We don't give space to thinking about in order to speak and eat. There's care that I have to give to my mouth. In order to get up and move, there is care that I need to think about with respect to my muscles. When I'm eating, there is care I need to think about with respect to the functioning of my blood flow.
Absolutely.
Like we don't think
Yeah,
that's a lot of detail.
yeah.
Like at what space and time does an individual begin to at least subconsciously thinking about the detailed care of their bodies?
Unfortunately, and particularly for men, it's after something has happened. It's
Mm,
after they've experienced a diagnosis, or when it has just got to the point where now I've got to go to the doctor. And sadly enough, men still take a little longer to even go to the doctor. Men are walking around with symptoms and feeling something a long time and still will
hmm
ignore it. The problem there is there's so many things, not so many, but a few things in our bodies that, for instance, let me just use, for instance, the kidneys. You can lose
hmm
90% function of your kidneys before you feel a symptom. So you could be
Wow.
walking around with only 10% function of your kidneys before you go to the doctor and finally address it. And guess what stage that is? Typically stage 3 or 4 kidney disease. And so it's
Yeah.
one of these situations where, as we continue to make aware to more and more people and to men, and debunk, the obstacles that have typically stood in the way, like, oh, I'm not going to the doctor, the stigma around, men don't go to the doctor, men are supposed to be strong, and I'm tough and I can make it. If we can debunk that and really continue to educate our men about, hey, there's nothing wrong with going to the doctor and seeing where you're at. There's nothing wrong with self-care. Like you said, it's not something
Right.
men think about. And then how many men want to address the emotional part of their lives?
Right.
Men don't
Right. You
hardly
can't be
talk.
seen weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Men
You
don't
can't be
hardly
seen weak.
talk. That's why I love spaces
Right.
like this, where you give a safe place for men to come and hopefully open up and talk about things like this. Because a man will have something going on and he will just ride it. You know, the whole direction example. They're not going to ask for direction. They will
Mhm.
drive around in a circle and stay lost for the longest before, you know. And it's
Mhm,
the
mhm. Absolutely. Hey, been there, done that.
And that's the same in the health space. And that's the reason why this conversation is so important. Because if we can get men to understand and men to rally around each other to help understand, like, man, it is okay. Man, it's okay. Tell me how you feel. Man, let's talk about
Mhm,
it. Man, no, it's okay.
mhm.
Yeah, you went and took a self care day. Man, that's good. Hey, to me, that is taking your power back. That needs to be the new
Yeah.
masculine.
Mhm. And the crazy thing too, as you were kind of talking about kidneys, um, sometime even the compensation of pain adds to the destruction of something in your body. I was thinking about as I was in my kind of mid 30s going through my initial teeth because I wasn't paying attention to those things and having a toothache and popping Advil all the time, right? Popping, 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 popping like they were sweet tarts to come and find out that I believe it's the ibuprofen in there that actually attacks your kidneys. So over time, the very thing that you're taking that you think is taking care of one
Yep.
problem is actually causing another problem.
Absolutely. So in ibuprofen, Tylenol, all of those over-the-counter medications, um, at some point, long term, is going to affect your liver and your
Your
kidneys.
liver
Yep, your
and
liver.
okay.
Everything we put in our
Mm,
mouths, our kidneys and our livers have to do something with it. And if it's good, whether it's
mm,
good or bad, it has to figure out what to do with it. So as we continue to put that stuff in our bodies, and of course, you got that horrible headache and whatever is going on. You just want to get out of pain. That every once in a while, okay, pop a Tylenol. But the daily dependency on it, the regular dependency on it, without figuring out the real source of the pain,
mm,
will inevitably have a long-term effect. And as you start to diminish the health of your liver and your kidneys, now you're really coming down in your health. Like it's really going to
mhm.
start to break things down.
Where does daily activity play in this? Because, there's one of the things I used to say all the time, jokingly say it, but in some spaces, somewhat serious about when I say it too. And I'm like, you know what? When I was growing up, and I used to, every summer back in the day from New York City, after school was over, we were put on a Greyhound bus and sent to North Carolina to help on the fields in the summer, right? And
Okay.
so, and those were 3 a.m. get ups in the morning, take a shower, you're eating breakfast by 4,
Mhm.
by 5 o'clock, you're on the field, right?
Mhm.
And then by 3, things are shutting down because it's so hot. You can't be out there no more, but you've already got that 7 to 8 hours of work in or
Gotcha.
6 or 7 or whatever that you got in. And I used to always say, my aunt, my uncles and aunts and all of them, they ate pork all the time and they lived to like 80, 90 years old.
Mhm.
And it's like that same thing doesn't hold true
Yeah.
because I think the activity of our bodies back then was so much different than the activity today. How much is that also a part of the functional wellness piece?
Oh, absolutely. It plays a huge part because not only are there differences in what's in our foods today,
Hmm.
but that sedentary lifestyle, like you said, back in the day, like they worked. They worked in fields. It was more jobs that weren't sedentary, where we weren't sitting down. And back in the day, people they went to bed at night. It wasn't the stressors and the
Mm,
things that people are going through now, and all of that impacts. And that's what I'm saying, when we talk about functional, we're talking about the whole body. And I think today some of the things, and even though back in the day they were going through some real stuff, there was still different stuff in our foods. So even though they ate the pork and the fat back and the lard and those things, they also didn't have the same additives and things like that in all the other foods that we have today.
Mm,
So, because even
mhm,
now,
mhm,
somebody could really go on a health journey and they could still eat organic, grass fed, um, pasteurized eggs. They could still eat those things and be okay. You could still eat some of those meats. The problem is so much is being done to it now. The chemicals, the hormones that they're being injected with. They're feeding them the
mhm,
animals bad diets, and that's the difference. We also had a lot more
mhm.
farming and stuff going on back in the day. People had their own, they grew their own stuff. That was their pig,
Right.
they ate, or at least the person down the street. Things were just different then. Farming and that sort of thing was different back in the day. And so it impacted the body differently than it does today.
And then when you look at income, right, where people live also has a tremendous, particularly when you're talking about people of color
Hmm.
in urban spaces around the country, where the lower they are on the socioeconomic level, the lesser the quality of the
Absolutely.
things they eat, right?
Absolutely.
Because they're eating at that point for convenience, right? It's the quickness. It's like, listen, I don't have time to cook tonight. There's 7 of y'all in the house. Let me stop by McDonald's and get y'all all some hot dogs, hot dogs, hamburgers, or stop by the hot dog stand or get you this kind
Mhm.
of quick stuff, or y'all just gonna eat cereal with loads and loads of sugar on it, and we're just gonna keep moving. And we don't even think sometimes when we're talking to folks that the socioeconomic situation that they're in is actually placing a harness on their ability to eat healthy.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. That is one of the top things that hurts that, and access to healthcare. All of that plays a part in it. All of that
Mm,
plays a part. Yeah.
right.
Socioeconomic, not being
Mhm,
able to, like you said, the quick stuff. Like we don't have the traditional families anymore at home where somebody prepared dinner and then you sit down together and you eat. You're right. You stop off and get something real
mhm,
quick, and it's usually the cheapest thing you can find, which is also the least healthy thing that you can find. And so that
mhm,
tremendously impacts it. And then the jobs and economics, like having you know, um, being paid a lot less in some of the fields that some of our people still are in, just not being able to
mhm.
afford it, just not able to
Yeah.
afford it.
Yeah, you said something on our webinar, and we were talking about, or you were talking about doctors, the doctors that we go to, the servers. And I think a lot of people believe that, if they find a physician of color, that that's the best thing for them. And in many instances, it is, but not always. And so it doesn't mean that just because your doctor is of color, you don't ask specific questions and you don't question specific things that they're giving you.
Hmm.
What is it that we should be taking into consideration whether or not our doctor looks like us or not look like us?
Well, and I think the thing is just changing our mindset, period, around the healthcare system. And I,
Mhm.
I may have mentioned this, but I don't even feel like we have a healthcare system. It's a sick care system. It's a sick
Mm.
care system because you go when you're sick. And if we could change our mindset to know that I'm only going to go to the doctor if I have to go to the doctor, or I'm only going to go to the doctor to get my annual stuff just to make sure, get my baseline, know my numbers, know where I am. If you can get in your mind that that's what it's utilized for, it's for when you're sick, it's for you to establish a baseline or get that physical exam or maybe get the annual testing that they suggest. I still believe you should do that. But outside of that, your health is your
Mhm.
responsibility. And that's why I tell people you got to build your own healthcare team. And so if we change our mentality about that, it wouldn't really matter the skin color or what they're saying. Of course, we would love to say, oh, okay, well, I got a black doctor, so let me, he's going to tell me that. And there are some really good ones out there. But unfortunately, there are still some that have really, they're really dug into that traditional route, and they're just not going to give you any advice outside of popping a pill. And
Mm,
doctors are not required to take a nutrition course in med school. It's an elective. And as important as nutrition is, they're not really able to give you sound advice about
mhm,
nutrition and lifestyle changes. So they're not going to do that. So to even
mhm.
depend solely on your physician for your health is already a bad idea.
How do you learn about health, though? Where's the good source to go to find out about health? Because you hear this all the time. Stay away from WebMD. That's bad for you because any symptom or any disease you're trying to conjure up in your head, you'll find it on WebMD. But okay, that is supposed to be the most comprehensive space in the world to get information on health. Yet folks say don't go there. So where do you get your information from?
Well, and that's the reason why I say build your team. You're going to need a
Mm,
functional, you need a functional medicine, functional nutrition provider on your team. That's somebody that can
mhm,
give you that type guidance, somebody that can say, hey,
mhm,
no, and debunk some of those things that are out there. Because, yeah, there is a lot of information. Now, WebMD, there are still some things on WebMD that are very true. Like they have some sound advice and things like that. The problem is you get that advice and then don't know what to do with it, or you
mm.
get that advice and you don't know, you know what I'm saying? Because it's going to tell you, okay, you should do XYZ, but you really shouldn't be just kind of taking that in your own hands. For instance, if you're already on a medication, you shouldn't just kind of be taking yourself off a weenie or taking that, you can if you want to, but you're going to put yourself more at risk of making your body go in this up and down thing versus talking to somebody in that functional space where they can give you guidance. So my suggestion is you might look it up, you might read about it, but then you also need to build a team of outside providers outside of the conventional medicine team. Build a team where
Mhm.
you have somebody that you can call and say, hey, I read this, and this, or I'm experiencing this, and that. I'm taking that, and let them get a full picture of what you have going on and give you better advice.
Yeah, I think I'm in information overload now, and a lot of times don't even know what to do with it because now we're also at a time and space where, you know, your entire physical record is electronic
Right.
and you can see it and everybody can see it and doctors are sharing their information with the urgent care space and this and wherever you're going for help, even the schools
Right.
can tap in, and begin to start looking at things. Then when I get home, my small, blood pressure monitor thing is Bluetooth to my phone that feeds Apple Health. My scale is attached to my Apple
Yeah.
Health. It tells me my fat ratio. It tells me my muscle content. It allows me to set goals, my steps, all those things. So while technology can be overwhelming in some spaces, it could be extremely useful when it comes to at least knowing. The problem is now I have all this information and oftentimes I don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's where that provider comes in handy. But I love, I mean, like you said, it is information overload, but I love that people even want to look into it because I tell people all the time, you have to become a student of what you got going on. If you have high
Mm,
blood pressure, you have to be tracking your own blood pressure. You cannot be
hmm
waiting to your 3 month, 6 month checkup, before you know your next reading. Like you have to know. If
hmm
you have diabetes, you have to know your numbers. You have to become a student of that. Does that mean go back to school and get a degree or a certification? No, but you have to become a student of what you have going on so that you
hmm
can. I tell people, even when I advise them about, okay, well, ask your doctor about such and such and this, and that. So that you can go back and have that healthy dialogue. Because the doctors, they're going to spend that little 15 minutes that they have to be in the room with you. And that's it. And they're not going to go into any more detail than you
mm,
pro, 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 probe them into. Sorry. They're not going to go into more. But if you have questions,
right.
now they got to answer them. If you say, okay, well, you told me I have high blood pressure. Do we know the source of this high blood pressure? Do we know why? Okay, well, then why did you put me, not to question them in a way that you're going to
Right.
make them uncomfortable, but just enough questions to say, hey, I want to know more. I'm not just going to take this prescription, walk out of here, and that's it. And then they're forced to kind of answer a few more questions. But you're a lot of times, like you said, you have so much information, you don't even know, you don't know what to ask. So that's where kind of that other, they don't know. Like, I don't know what he said. Half the time, my family members are
Right. Because even my blood workup, right? I go get the blood workup, all the information and the results hit my chart like that evening in a couple of hours, right? And so I'm looking at it like, okay, I have no idea what any of this means, but I guess it's kind of good that the stuff is still flowing into the
yeah.
spaces, right? Let's lean a little bit on this 40 plus side because you've taken a focus on, folks in that space.
hmm
I'm just going to ask you, I know what the difference is because I'm way past the 40 plus side. I'm in a whole nother stratosphere, in terms of explaining the difference between what health is like for me at 60 and what health was like for me at 20. But when you start crossing that 40 plus space, what are some of the things that you need to begin to seriously begin to focus on?
So, and for men, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, prostate health, testicular health. Those are definitely some things after the 40 mark that you need to start to look at. And particularly as you get closer to 45, knocking on 50, this is when our body starts to get to a place where it's unable to overcompensate for some of those deficiencies that we talked about earlier. This is at the point where the heart is like,
Mm,
okay, I used to be able to compensate for that, you sitting around not getting any exercise or you eating the way you ate. I used to be able to compensate a little better. Now things are slowing down. Metabolism is slowing down. Our blood sugar is being impacted because the more sugar we have in our blood, now the blood is forced to pump in a different way. So all of those sort of things are starting to happen. Our posture is starting, because if we're not focusing on strengthening our core, now the posture is here. And you may have heard that for men, like that gut health, men having a certain circumference around their waist has a
mm,
huge impact on their prostate. Huge impact. So it is important, not just from an aesthetic
mm,
standpoint, but it's important from a health standpoint to make sure that that gut is a lot smaller. We don't need the beer bellies. We don't need the dad bods and then we just need to settle for it. We really need to take that serious.
mhm,
For men, because that is what is bringing about bad health, because it's the visceral fat. So they might think, oh, well, my arms looking still
mhm,
pretty good, legs looking still pretty good, but they have this gut. That is the most dangerous fat to have
mm,
because that's the fat around your organs.
mm.
And that's where bad health
Yeah.
is starting to set in.
And that's the hardest to get rid
Yeah.
of out of all the weight that I've lost. I mean, I've lost a lot around the midsection, but it's still not where it needs to be,
hmm
but it's actually at a manageable
Good.
space. It's interesting that you talk about kind of dad bods and bods because culturally we're also kind of going through shifting periods of, you know, what is body shame and what isn't body shame and what looks good and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
hmm
And so, for a long time, when we saw TV, particularly when we saw supermodels and models and people on TV, they were always small, right? They were never of any, any large weights. And now you're seeing larger and larger, people kind of everywhere. You see them on the news where you never seen them before. You see them in commercials where you
hmm
never seen them before. You see them on the beach where you never seen them before. You
Right.
see them on the
Right.
fashion runway where you've never seen them before. And now we're kind of moving into this other space, which is really, interesting because for some time, because of my diabetes, and this was before this thing became big, I didn't even know that there was this stigmatism around Ozempic until it actually, people began to start talking about it on social media, right?
hmm
Because it was originally created for one thing, but then they realized that it also does something else. And I always, often when I talk about it, I talk about, and I don't know if you remember, when Dove made what was that stuff they made? It was like a skin tone, it was like a sunscreen or something they
Hmm.
had created, and they sold it through Avon. Remember? And all of a sudden, people
Oh,
realized that it also was an insect repellent. Remember that? People started like wearing it for
yeah, yeah,
making sure not to get bit by mosquitoes when they were
yeah.
outside. So sometimes in a fluke way, they create something for one thing and another. But it's like interesting now because when you see people who kind of talk about using it and losing weight, right? They've been big all their lives and
Hmm.
now they're getting smaller and they're more healthy. Even myself, like I feel much more healthier today than I did a year ago. I
Yeah.
move better. I sleep better. I think better. I function better. I do all of those things better. And as a result of that, I'm also now paying attention to those things you talked about. I'm eating smaller portions.
Hmm.
I'm not eating just to eat. I'm not stopping eating when I get tired. I stop eating when I don't want no more. Like, and so I'm finding I'm leaving half of my food, if not three quarters of my food on my plate, because by the time I get through a portion of it, I don't want it anymore. Right. And so there's this shame. It's like, oh, you're using the what they say that you're doing. You're using the easy way out. You're losing weight the easy way. I was like,
Uh,
don't when you that big, you don't care how you losing it. You just want to
you just
lose
want to
it.
lose it.
It's right. And so when you think about the formality of medicine and where wellness and the way that we should be thinking about it up against the societal narrative in terms of what people think we should look like and how we should get to where we want to look like, how much of that conversation takes place in the functional wellness space? Because that is the consideration that people have to take on.
Yeah, and for me, from an aesthetic standpoint, smaller doesn't equal healthier.
Mm,
So even though if you a little, bigger and obese and you're unhealthy, then yes, losing some weight is going to make you feel better. But I know some
mm,
people that are, a little smaller, not obese, but I mean a little bigger, not necessarily obese, but they're healthy. They eat clean,
mm,
they just have a bigger statue. So it's not about
mhm,
the stigma of looking and being tiny or being a certain size. It's more about, like I said, being healthy, feeling healthy. And as long as you are doing some of the things, the lifestyle changes and eating some of the right things, and you feel good and you're sleeping better, like you mentioned, you're making sure you're not putting extra chemicals and things in your body. That is what's more important. And those are the conversations
mm,
we have more on the mental side or emotional side as we talk to people about like some of those things and the stigma. And you're right. People are running out, getting that Ozempic, but the problem is, after taking it, and once you stop taking it, then what? So even if you were
mm,
someone that decides, okay, let me take Ozempic just to get it off, like you said, you're bigger, you just want to get it off, you don't care about all the rest. The problem is in taking it, even for a little bit, just to get the weight off, you also need to be learning lifestyle habits that will support it once you stop taking
mm,
it. You also have to ensure that you're not
mm,
dealing with the side effects that come along with it. Unfortunately, that's not what's being taught. Okay, maybe I need a 30-day, let me just get, you know, 20 pounds off. And then, but the mindset, if your mindset hasn't changed and you haven't changed the other things that are going to maintain the longevity of those results, then that's where the problem lies. So it's not so much it
mm,
lies within exactly what you're doing to lose the weight. It lies in the fact that if your mindset is not changed for the long haul, because the 30, the
mm.
60, the 90-day fixes are not good.
Right. And that's the danger of social media, right? Social media will get you to start believing that, you can be cured in a day.
Mm-mm.
Right? I'm watching, we know our phones listen to us, right? So whatever conversation we're having for the next hour, everything that comes off my scroll is going to be
Right.
about this health conversation. As soon as we hang up, like our phone's going to be having a whole nother interview with us, right?
Right.
And so, but one of the things that often comes across my phone is things about teeth because I'm always kind of talking about my dental journey and those kinds of things. And you're seeing these ads where people are, thinking that they can go and get the procedure in a day and be good. First of all, no person on this planet can walk into a dentist's office and literally get their mouth cut wide open, have something else installed in it, and think you're coming out tomorrow
Right.
like nothing happened, smiling.
It's a journey.
That ain't, yeah, it's not happening,
Mhm.
right? And then there's a lot of complications that come as a result of that. And then this other piece where people are, which is where I'm kind of headed now, which is healthcare costs, right? Other people are coming out and realizing that those procedures come with a cost, right? And it was one of the things that I didn't mention when David was interviewing me. It was on my mind, but I forgot to mention it, and I felt bad that I didn't, because it's a key component, of this that doesn't really have anything to do with health. And what I wanted to say was, in my teeth journey, when I found out that I had to have full reconstruction, take out everything and replace, the only thing that gave me the ability to do that, because my dental insurance did not cover it, is that I had good credit. So I had to get a loan
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that. Less my ability to be able to do that, I'd be sitting here not having a conversation with you, because I would not be able to talk with that full reconstruction.
Yeah.
So part of crossing into that 40 space, when you do not have health insurance, when dental insurance is not good anyway,
Right.
optical
Yeah.
insurance is not good anyway,
Mm-mm.
health insurance is falling and failing badly. When it comes to those kinds of things, what is the emphasis on people who are moving into those 40 plus spaces to begin to start thinking about their occupational lives differently?
Mhm.
Because you can't get to 50 plus and 60 plus and not have some health plan in place.
That's what I love about HSA. And even though I instruct people, get something outside of that. Because I'm like you, I had to go down that dental journey as well. And I had to go to a natural dentist, and my insurance covered nothing almost. It
Mm,
covered an
mhm,
initial x-ray and for her to look at me, but that was it. Like every other
mm.
procedure after that came out of my pocket. And so they have some other means and some other, like you said, they have the other credit and things that you can use now, or you can get those procedure done. But that's the other thing I said. I tell people, don't be afraid to invest in your health, because the first thing people say, well, do you take insurance? And that's fine that you feel that way, because that's what we've been conditioned. But do you take insurance? No, because the pharmaceutical companies that kind of run the insurance world as well won't allow for a holistic approach to be covered, because it's not
Mm,
driven by the pharmaceuticals. And so you're not there. It's not going to be covered outside of that space. So it's another area where you have to kind of put away for it, or like you said, begin to make sure you understand this might be something I need to invest in, and don't be afraid to invest in another
right.
holistic approach, because it's a part of that emotional, mind, body, spirit, financial well-being.
Mhm.
All of those things start to come into play. So hitting over that 40 age, these are some of the things that say, okay, not only do I need to start looking at XYZ, but also need to make sure my finances are in order. Because you think about that
Right.
money put away for a flat tire, you need to be putting
Mhm.
money away for naturalistic health stuff. Either that, or
Mhm.
eating
Yeah.
right, or being willing to spend the money it costs to eat better, you know.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I've been talking about in my business workshops, particularly with folks who want to become self-employed and entrepreneurs, which is, that still doesn't take away the responsibility of you having to have health
Right.
plans that cost.
Right.
So you can't go out there and start running up your profit margin and forget
Yeah.
that, you don't have anything in place to take care of your
Right.
health, and not only for you, but for your entire
Right.
family. So it's nice, unless you're jumping out the gate making millions, which that's not happening for most
Right.
people, right? You
Hmm.
have to take all those things into consideration, which means you got to take into consideration the infrastructure of your business and the
Absolutely.
longevity that it takes to get there.
Hmm.
And folks aren't talking about that in this fast pace,
Right.
make 6 digits
Right.
in 30 days, blah, blah, blah. They're not talking to people about that stuff. I digress in that space because it's driving me crazy
Yeah.
watching it. The other phenomenon that's happening out there, Danielle, that I want you to talk about briefly is the increasing focus on vegan foods and restaurants cooking, non-dairy and non-meat items and those kinds of things. And I heard someone say it's more expensive to eat right than it is to eat wrong,
Definitely.
right?
It
And
is.
so, but when it comes to vegan foods, how healthy are those things, and how should people consider the intake of anything that is vegan?
Well, I love that approach in that they are taking away sort of the dairy and the meat factor because dairy is one of those foods that's inflammatory, meaning it causes inflammation in most people's bodies. And inflammation
Hmm.
is one of those key drivers to most disease. So, in that respect, that vegan lifestyle pays attention to that, and that's good. In terms of like kind of removing the meat side of that, it's another area, and that's because a lot of our meats are injected with hormones, injected with chemicals. And I often say, you are what you ate. So whatever that pig ate, whatever that
Hmm.
cow ate, you are what you ate. And so you're taking all of that in.
Hmm.
You're taking all of that in. So they have a good
Hmm.
concept. The thing that people have to pay attention to, though, that in that space, though, they haven't removed. People think, oh, well, all I eat is vegetables and this and this and that and that, but they also carb load. They also aren't taking the
Hmm.
sugars out. They're not paying attention to gluten, which is very inflammatory to the gut. And so it's about kind of being educated in the fact that, yes, that is a good lifestyle, but I know plenty of vegans that don't look like they're in the best shape, but they're vegan.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
you would think vegan,
Hmm.
vegetarian, they're supposed to look all fit. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily equal that if they aren't as well paying attention to the gluten, paying attention to the sugar intake, because they're like, oh, I take the meat and dairy out, but you're still eating all the sugar. You're still eating all the grain. I mean, all the
Right.
flours, so that is the
Hmm.
difference. And, it's a lot to think about. And until I really got into this space, it wouldn't have been something that I would have known either, but it's not, unfortunately,
Hmm.
until
Hmm.
you kind of experience something yourself that you realize, okay, well, why is this? And let me work backwards and figure out this. Like, there's so many things now that have happened to my body, and like with my husband and my brothers and some of my dad, my uncles. I've worked with all of them in a certain space where I'm like, okay, no, you probably need to do, and they'll call me. Well, this is happening. Da, 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 da.
Hmm.
Well, did you do this? Like, I'm analyzing. Well, did you take that? Because
Hmm.
my family will tell you, you walk around with a headache, the first thing you're doing is you're not popping an ibuprofen, Advil. We're going to assess why you have the headache, because there's so
Right.
many
Right.
reasons why you can have a
Hmm.
headache. Dehydration, you didn't get enough sleep, you're not wearing your glasses, your eyes are bothered. Like, there's so
Hmm.
many other reasons. You
Hmm.
didn't eat yet. You're deficient. But if you just pop a Tylenol, you think you might feel better temporarily, but it's going to come back if you don't address why it really happened. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Hmm.
it's something, a
As
lot
we
to consider.
round off to the end of this thing, because you will be back, we're going to dig down into some of these things, and because some of them need more depth of conversation. But there's some old school things that we've always been told: stay away from, don't eat this, don't consume this. And then there are some old school things that we were told a long time ago was good, and then we were told it wasn't good, and then we were told it's good again. And so sometimes, like, this kind of flow in terms of like what's good today, what's not good today, what's good tomorrow is another kind of navigation you have to do when it comes to food. I'm just going to throw a couple of them out there, and I want you to just kind of respond to where we should be with respect to these couple of items. Salt.
Okay, so salt, the most people believe that salt, high blood pressure, salt is the culprit for high blood pressure. But the truth is that once you have high blood pressure, then you need to watch your salt intake, the sodium intake. But the cause is more of the sugar intake that caused the blood pressure, because sugar is what will thicken the blood, making it harder for your blood to pump through your heart. So salt wasn't the cause of it, but once you
Okay.
have high blood pressure, yes, you need to watch your salt.
So since you've already talked about sugar, but I'm gonna stay there anyway. Let's go to sugar.
Now, sugar, the table
Sugar
sugar
what?
all day,
Yeah.
is bad. It's bad. I don't care who tells you now it's
No,
okay.
no
It's
way to
never
slice it,
okay.
right? No
Sugar
matter
is
how you
bad.
slice it, it ain't good.
It ain't good. And then sugar substitutes are even worse. So, like monk fruit and stevia, so stevia, natural stevia leaf, and maybe a raw honey should be the only things that you should be using to
Hmm.
sweeten your foods, or a natural sugar, which is found in our fruits and stuff like that, natural sugars. But sugar, fake sugar, it's
Oh.
a no. It's not going to fluctuate.
If it's coming out the box, it ain't good for you.
It's not
Shouldn't be
good.
coming out the box. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Two more. Uh, it was salt, sugar. What was it? Oh, carbonated sodas.
Oh yeah, carbonated soda. So the carbonation in itself isn't necessarily the culprit, because you can get a natural carbonated machine that'll make that CO. The problem is people are in a place where they can't expel the carbonation well. And if you have bad gut health already, then
Mm.
it kind of gets trapped in there, and that's where you'll have gas and that sort of thing. But the other thing about carbonated drinks, so you're just talking about soda, is the sugar. And so people think, oh, well, I'll just
Mm.
drink Coke Zero. Well, those zeros that are not, or Diet Coke, it has aspartame, which is worse. Aspartame can cause cancer. So if you just have to have a soda, you might as well drink the real thing and go ahead and get that sugar. I'd rather you have the sugar than the aspartame, because you don't want cancer. But the thing is to come off of it. You got to come off of it. You got to find other ways to flavor your water. And like I said, you can get
Hmm.
it's a natural carbonated machine, and you put your water and the flavoring in it. It'll carbonate it for you.
Hmm.
So if you
Yeah,
just
because I saw something the other day that was talking about especially dark
yeah,
carbonated drinks. Are even worse. The other thing they talked about is energy drinks, fruit juices, and I
yeah,
can't remember what
full of
the other one.
sugar,
There was a fourth one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
full of sugar. Those fruit
Okay,
juices.
last one. Yeah, last one. Milk, because I grew up
You
on
need
milk,
almond milk.
and then they said drinking milk wasn't good, and
Yeah.
now they back to milk is good again.
Well, it has changed, and it depends on who's drinking it, and it depends on who needs it and why you need it. So for our little people, the vitamin D, they kind of need that source early on. But when you look at where the milk is coming from, that's where the problem lies. Because if it's coming from that cow that has been injected with hormones and been injected with antibiotics, that's where the problem lies. Now you got somebody else that is sensitive to dairy or have a gut issue, then it's not good for them. And I think the thing is, when we hear about things being good and then they're not good and then they're good, it's not all encompassing. They may not be referring to you. And that's the other good thing about functional medicine, because it can be individualized. Because there are some people that drink milk, been
Mm,
drinking milk, will always drink milk, and nothing will ever happen. And those are the people, they're not talking to you when they start to say, okay, stop drinking milk because it does
yeah.
XYZ. You don't need to drink because it does that. It's not all encompassing. We're not talking about everybody. And so, again, another reason
Hmm.
why it's
That's why it
important to
throws
make
me
sure
off.
everything is, yeah, that's why you have to make sure everything is
Hmm.
individualized. What is good for you and what you might be able to
Yeah.
tolerate is not the same for me. It's the individualized
Yeah,
approach.
because
Those other the other ones you
yeah,
named,
that
that
was
was
my
everybody.
choice of
That's
drink
kind
of
of across the
choice.
board.
Yeah, that was my drink of choice growing up. Milk. I drank milk like it was water. I didn't drink
I did
anything
too.
but my mother couldn't feed me anything but milk. And it wasn't until my later ages, like later, that it began to bother me just a little bit. But that was very short lived. There must have been something else going on in my space because now I'm back at it again and it's nothing going on.
Right.
And my son is the same
Yeah.
way. My son is like, if it's not milk, he's not drinking it.
See?
And so, but he's 16 and he has a different kind of body than I
Yeah.
did. But when I'm watching him, I tell his mother, I was like, listen, he's doing the same. I would literally drink a half a gallon of milk, if not a gallon of milk in a whole day, every day,
Too back in the day.
every day.
And that's what I
Yeah.
mean by it going back and forth. It just depends on you and your body. It's
Hmm.
so individualized because again, like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
changed to the fact that now you can do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Danielle, thanks so much. Just told you this was going to be fun. Told you this was going to be fun. And we got to come back and we got to dig down because you did mention a couple of things and I didn't want to go deep into those
Yeah.
because I know that those things could carry us into some spaces. You talked about the prostate. And so that 40 over is huge thing for men
Yeah.
in that space. Exercise, the right exercise and how to exercise,
Hmm.
how to stop. And then really being able to remember there used to be this whole thing about reading the label. People used to always tell you that before you purchase anything, you had to read the label.
Hmm.
Well, back when we were reading the label, it was very simple. Calories, sodium, cholesterol, it was very simple. Now every word is like 15
Yeah.
letters. And if you don't know what it is, you don't know what it is a supplement of, or you
Hmm.
don't know what it is. So reading labels don't really work for most
Yeah.
people anymore. And then lastly, um, really talking about holistic functional health care and not only how come it is important for you to pay attention to that for you, but it's also important to understand that you are modeling behavior for your children, right?
Absolutely. The
And we don't think about that part.
generational health.
Yeah,
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 that's a
we
whole
don't think
topic
about
by
that.
itself. That's a whole topic by
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I appreciate you for joining us on I Am Dad podcast. And I want to thank all of my listeners for joining us today. You know how I like to leave you. Always be kind to yourself as you're kind. Always be kind to others as you're kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend Art Mitchell used to always say to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but it's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, take care and peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.
Yeah.